The letter that changed everything. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I'm 33 years old. Until one Tuesday morning last fall, I believed I understood my family. I believed I knew the limits of control, the shape of love, and the line that even deeply flawed parents would never cross. I was wrong. The envelope arrived just after 9 a.m. It wasn't delivered by the usual mail carrier who left packages wedged crookedly against the lobby mailboxes. This time, there was a sharp knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, a man in a dark county uniform stood there, posture stiff, eyes deliberately unfriendly. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself. He handed me the envelope and said, "You've been served," then turned and walked down the hall. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Thick. Official. The kind of envelope that never carries good news. I closed the door, leaned my back against it, and stared at my name typed neatly across the front. Evelyn Marie Hart. Inside, printed in merciless black ink, were the words that made the room tilt. Family Court. Petition for conservatorship. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower, as if my brain might suddenly decide it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. My parents were asking a judge to declare me legally incompetent. My own parents. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand what my life actually looked like before that envelope showed up. I lived alone in a small but sun-filled one-bedroom condo in Portland, Oregon, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where people waved at each other but didn't ask intrusive questions. My place wasn't fancy, but it was mine, paid for, carefully maintained, filled with books and plants and silence that felt earned. I worked as a senior archivist at the Oregon Historical Society, a job that didn't impress anyone at cocktail parties but mattered deeply to me. My days were spent preserving letters, journals, photographs, pieces of ordinary lives that history usually forgets. It was patient work. Quiet work. Honest work. I liked it that way. I had built this life deliberately, brick by brick, after leaving home 8 years earlier with nothing but a single suitcase and a very clear understanding that peace sometimes costs everything familiar. My parents, Richard and Lillian Hart, had always valued appearances above all else. From the outside, the Hart family looked flawless. A restored colonial house in an affluent suburb outside Lake Oswego, luxury cars in the driveway, country club memberships, charity galas, annual holiday letters bragging about accomplishments. My father was a senior partner at a respected law firm. My mother chaired committees, hosted fundraisers, and curated her image like a second career. They were admired. Envied. Inside that house, affection was conditional. Love was never freely given, it was earned, measured, and revoked without warning. Praise came with expectations attached. Silence came with punishment. My younger brother, Daniel, learned early how to play their game. He echoed their opinions, followed the approved career path, and was rewarded with approval that felt warm only if you didn't look too closely. I was the anomaly. Too quiet. Too introspective. Too content with things that couldn't be displayed or monetized. I didn't want a corner office. I wanted a corner desk in a library. I didn't dream about networking events. I dreamed about deciphering handwriting in a 200-year-old diary. To my parents, this wasn't just disappointing. It was alarming. The real rupture came when I was 25. I had just completed my master's degree in archival science, a milestone I was quietly proud of. My parents invited me to a family dinner to celebrate. Halfway through the meal, my father slid a glossy brochure across the table. An MBA program. "This is where you need to be now," he said, voice calm and final. "This archive phase has gone on long enough." I remember waiting for my mother to say something. To soften it. To defend me. She didn't even look up from inspecting her manicure. "Your father knows what's best for your future," she said lightly. Something in me went very still. That night, I packed a single suitcase, folded my childhood bedroom door closed without slamming it, and left. No dramatic confrontation. No shouting. Just a quiet understanding that staying would cost me my entire self. The years that followed were hard. I waited tables. Lived with roommates. Counted every dollar. Started at the Historical Society as a junior assistant and worked my way up slowly, meticulously. I paid off my student loans. Saved for a used car. Scraped together a down payment. There was no trust fund. No safety net. Just me. And I was proud of that. My parents, meanwhile, treated my independence like a prolonged tantrum. Something I would eventually grow out of. They called occasionally on holidays, their voices stiff and polite. They never visited my home. They didn't know what it looked like. What it meant to me. They only knew one thing. They couldn't control it. So when that court petition arrived, it wasn't completely out of nowhere. It was the nuclear option I had always feared but never truly believed they would use. A conservatorship. They wanted legal control over my finances, my assets, my decisions. According to the petition, I displayed a pattern of emotional instability and financial immaturity. My career was described as impractical. My independence as self-isolation. Reading their words felt like being erased on paper. For a moment, standing alone in my living room, I almost collapsed under it. Then I looked around. At the shelves I'd built myself. At the books I loved. At the quiet life I had fought for. And something hardened inside me. This was my life. And I wasn't about to let them bulldoze it because they didn't understand its design. I picked up my phone. It was time to find a lawyer. Part 2, Choosing the Right Enemy. I didn't call just any lawyer. I knew better than that. A conservatorship case isn't about paperwork. It's about power, who gets to define reality in front of a judge. And my parents had spent their entire lives mastering that skill. I needed someone who understood that kind of war. Her name was Marianne Shaw. I'd come across her years earlier in a long-form article buried deep in a legal journal, one of those pieces you read late at night and save without quite knowing why. She specialized in contested guardianship cases, financial coercion, and what she bluntly called respectable abuse. Parents who used the language of concern to mask control. Families who weaponized the courts to reclaim assets they believed they were entitled to. Marianne had dismantled those cases with surgical precision. Her office was downtown, in a modern glass building overlooking the Willamette River, about as far removed as possible from the dark wood, leather-bound, old-money aesthetic of my father's law firm. When I arrived, I half expected a receptionist to tell me she was unavailable. Instead, I was shown directly into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Marianne stood as I entered. She was in her mid-50s, with sharp gray eyes and dark hair cut in a clean, no-nonsense bob. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except a watch that looked expensive for reasons no one could explain. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Evelyn Hart," she said, extending her hand. "I've read the petition." "Sit." I did. "They're not testing you," she continued. "They're trying to break you before you realize this is a fight." "I figured," I said. My voice surprised me by staying steady. Her eyes flicked up. That earned me the slightest nod. "Good. Then we're starting in the right place." She slid the petition across the desk. "This is aggressive. They're alleging incompetence without medical evidence, financial irresponsibility without records, and emotional instability without diagnosis. That tells me two things." She held up one finger. "They think you won't fight." A second finger. "And they're hiding something." She didn't ask me to summarize. She asked me to tell her everything. So I did. I talked for nearly 2 hours. I told her about conditional praise. About how love in my house had always come with. When I finally stopped, she leaned back in her chair. They're framing this as concern, she said. A fragile daughter with poor judgment who can't be trusted with money. She met my eyes. To beat that, we do two things. First, we prove you're the opposite of incompetent. We'll get statements from your employer, your bank, anyone who can establish a pattern of responsibility. Second, and this is the more important part, we prove motive. Motive for what? I asked. For control. Or money. Usually both. My stomach tightened. Do your parents have financial problems? I hesitated. Not that I know of. They've always lived comfortably. Marianne nodded. Lavish lifestyles often hide rot. Refinancing, leveraged properties, lawsuits, investments gone wrong. She tapped the desk once. If they're under pressure, a conservatorship gives them legal access to your assets. That's not concern. That's strategy. The idea made me feel sick. But we need more than suspicion, she continued. We need a pattern. She leaned forward. Have they ever tried to access your finances? I thought hard. No. Not directly. But, I paused. About 6 months ago, my father called. Out of the blue. He asked if I had a financial advisor. Said he could recommend someone from his firm to review my portfolio. I told him I had it handled. Marianne's eyes sharpened. And? He sounded annoyed. Said, you always think you have it handled. She smiled, not kindly. That was a probe. They were checking how exposed you were. She glanced at her calendar. The hearing is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My chest tightened. We'll file an immediate objection, she said calmly. But listen carefully. She stood, signaling the meeting's end. In that courtroom, they will not behave like parents. They will behave like plaintiffs. They will speak about you as if you're a child who can't manage her own shoes. Your mother may cry. Your father will sound calm and reasonable. They will try to make you react. She looked directly at me. You cannot. You sit still. You listen. You look competent. Your reaction is evidence. She paused. Can you do that? I thought of the girl I used to be, crying silently in her room so no one could accuse her of being dramatic. That girl was gone. Yes, I said. I can. Marianne nodded once. Good. Then here's what happens next. I'll have my investigator start immediately. You go live your life. Be normal. Do not contact them. If they reach out, you direct them to me. She opened the door. This is a war now. And the first rule is simple. Never let them see you bleed. I left her office shaking, but not with fear. With focus. For the first time since that envelope arrived, I wasn't alone. And somewhere deep down, I had the unsettling sense that my parents had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Part 3, The Quiet Life Becomes Evidence. The strangest part of preparing for war was how normal everything else became. Marianne told me not to change my routine, so I didn't. I went to work. I catalogued letters. I drank bad coffee in the break room and discussed footnotes with volunteers twice my age. I watered my plants in the evenings and read on the couch with my legs tucked under me. From the outside, my life looked small. From the inside, it was steady. And now, every ordinary detail mattered. At the Oregon Historical Society, my boss, Margaret Hale, noticed something was off immediately. Margaret was in her early 70s, sharp as a blade, with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime defending underfunded departments and priceless artifacts with equal ferocity. She took one look at my face, shut her office door, and said, "Sit." I told her. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't dramatize it. By the time I finished, her expression had gone from disbelief to fury. The audacity, she said flatly. Absolute audacity. She folded her hands on the desk. You are one of the most methodical, responsible people I've ever supervised. You manage irreplaceable documents for a living. She leaned forward. If they want to claim you're incompetent, they picked the wrong hill to die on. She didn't wait for me to ask. You have my support. Testimony. Reference letters. Records. Whatever you need. That support anchored me more than she probably realized. At Mary Ann's direction, I started gathering documents. Years of bank statements. Tax returns. Mortgage records. Employment contracts. Performance reviews. I didn't rush. I organized everything the way I organized archives, chronological, indexed, annotated. I built a timeline of my adult life. Every bill paid on time. Every promotion earned. Every financial decision documented. It wasn't flashy. It was devastatingly boring. Exactly what competence looks like. Meanwhile, Mary Ann's investigator worked quietly in the background. I didn't ask many questions. I trusted her instincts. Then, a week before the hearing, my phone rang while I was eating dinner. It was Mary Ann. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear something sharp underneath it. We found something. I set my fork down. Your parents' house, she said. The one in Lake Oswego. Yes. It's been refinanced 3 times in 5 years. My stomach dropped. There are also 2 liens filed for unpaid contractor work. She paused. And their investment portfolio is a mess. High-risk ventures. Several failed badly in the last 18 months. I closed my eyes. That's not all, she continued. There's a pending malpractice lawsuit against your father's firm. Major one. If it goes poorly, his partnership, and personal assets, are exposed. The room felt suddenly very quiet. The pieces clicked into place with chilling clarity. This wasn't about control for its own sake. This was about survival. My savings. My home. My assets. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a potential lifeboat. This changes everything, Mary Ann said. But we don't reveal it yet. Why not? I asked. Because we want them committed to their story, she replied. Let them paint you as unstable. Let them lock themselves into that narrative. Then we show the court who's actually desperate. She paused. Do you have anything else I should know about? Any assets they might not be aware of? I hesitated. There it was. The thing I'd never talked about. Not to my parents. Not to Daniel. Not to anyone outside a very small professional circle. Yes, I said quietly. But they don't know about it. Mary Ann didn't push. Tell me. I told her about my collection. About the rare journals, first edition local histories, personal letters from early industrial workers, items I'd acquired slowly, carefully, over a decade. Bought at estate sales, auctions, from retired collectors who cared more about stewardship than profit. I never thought of it as wealth. It was an extension of my work. My passion. Silence stretched on the line. Then Mary Ann spoke. Have these items ever been professionally appraised? Yes, I said. For insurance. Do you know the value? I have a general idea. Evelyn, she said evenly. We need a precise one. Within days, court-approved appraisers were in my apartment. They handled each piece with gloved reverence. Took notes. Photographs. Measurements. I watched from my kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug I'd forgotten to drink from. I'd always known the collection mattered. I hadn't realized just how much. When the preliminary numbers came back, Marianne exhaled slowly. "This," she said, "is not a hobby. This is leverage." The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I stood in my living room, running my fingers along the spines of books, looking at the framed prints I'd collected at street fairs, feeling the solidity of the walls around me. This wasn't just a legal fight. It was a reckoning. For the girl I'd been. For the woman I'd become. For the parents who had never truly seen me. I laid out my clothes carefully. A tailored navy dress. No frills. No softness. Just quiet authority. When I met Marianne in the courthouse lobby the next morning, she looked me over once and nodded. "Remember," she whispered. "They are the performance. You are the truth." Part 4, The Courtroom Performance. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No sweeping drama. No grand architecture. Just muted wood paneling, the faint smell of lemon polish, and the quiet tension of people whose lives were about to be dissected in public. It felt clinical. That somehow made it worse. Marianne guided me to the defendant's table on the right side of the room. I placed my hands flat on the cool surface and focused on keeping them still. I didn't look left. I didn't need to. I could feel them there. My parents. When the bailiff called the room to order and the judge entered, I finally lifted my eyes. Judge Thomas Caldwell was older, his expression worn but sharp, the look of someone who had seen every possible human mess and learned how to recognize patterns. At the plaintiff's table, my parents looked exactly as they wanted to look. My father, Richard Hart, wore his best charcoal suit, the one reserved for major clients and closing arguments. Calm. Confident. Every inch the respectable professional. My mother, Lillian, sat beside him in a tailored cream jacket, posture perfect, hands folded delicately. She looked like she was attending a charity luncheon, not asking the state to strip her daughter of autonomy. Between them sat their attorney. Jonathan Price. A senior associate from my father's firm. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. Price stood first. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is a painful day for my clients. Richard and Lillian Hart are here out of nothing but deep love and concern for their only daughter, Evelyn." I watched the judge's pen move. Price painted a portrait with practiced ease. A sensitive child. A withdrawn adult. A woman who never quite launched. He described my career as narrow, my independence as self-imposed isolation, my quiet life as a warning sign. "We fear," he said solemnly, "that Ms. Hart lacks the capacity to recognize her own limitations. She is vulnerable. She is making choices that place her financial future at serious risk." He paused for effect. "My clients seek only a limited conservatorship, to guide her, protect her, and ensure stability." Marianne didn't object. She let him build the stage. Then my mother was called to the stand. Watching her walk forward felt surreal. Her heels clicked softly. Her shoulders were relaxed. She was perfect. She swore the oath and sat, hands folded. She moved slowly, deliberately. "Mrs. Hart," she said, voice calm, "when was the last time you personally reviewed your daughter's financial records?" My mother blinked. "Well, we haven't. She refuses to share them." "So your concern isn't based on evidence of debt or mismanagement," Marianne continued, "but on her choice of career and decision to live independently." "It's based on a pattern of poor judgment," my mother replied, her voice tightening. "A pattern that includes graduating with honors, maintaining continuous employment for over a decade, and purchasing a home without assistance from you or your husband." Silence. "Anyone can get a mortgage," my mother said sharply. "That doesn't mean she can manage responsibility." "But she has," Marianne said gently. "For 5 years. Without a single late payment." She let it hang. "Mrs. Hart," Marianne continued, does your daughter have friends? She has acquaintances. No real support system. Marianne turned slightly toward the judge. We will be presenting testimony from her employer of 10 years and multiple community members who would disagree. She turned back. If your daughter were married, Marianne asked, would you still believe she required a conservator? My mother hesitated. That would be different. A husband would provide guidance. Objection, Price snapped. Sustained, the judge said, but his eyes lingered on my mother. Marianne nodded. One final question, she said. Do you love your daughter? My mother's expression flickered, just for a second. Of course. Thank you. No further questions. My father took the stand next. He was colder. More precise. He spoke of risk assessment, fiduciary responsibility, and emotional decision-making. He described me as sentimental, financially obstinate, and resistant to guidance. A child in an adult body. When Marianne rose to cross-examine him, the room seemed to cool. Mr. Hart, she said, you are a senior partner at Hart & Amp, Levinson, correct? Yes. You're familiar with refinancing, liens, and asset leverage. Of course. How many times have you refinanced your home in the last 5 years? Price jumped up. Objection, relevance. Marianne didn't look away. It goes directly to credibility and motive, Your Honor. The judge paused. I'll allow it. Proceed. My father's jaw tightened. I'd have to check. Would 3 times be accurate? A flush crept up his neck. That sounds possible. And the contractor liens filed against the property? Silence. For the first time, I saw something crack. Not fear. Rage. No further questions, Marianne said calmly. The seed had been planted. Part 5, The Truth Takes the Stand. By the time the court recessed for a short break, the air in the room had changed. Not dramatically. Not yet. But the certainty my parents had walked in with was no longer airtight. Doubt had slipped in through the cracks, quiet, invisible, but corrosive. When the hearing resumed, it was our turn. Marianne stood. Your Honor, she said, the defense calls Margaret Hale. My boss walked to the stand like she owned the room. She didn't dress to impress. Sensible jacket. Flat shoes. Hair pinned back. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had spent decades protecting things that mattered. After she was sworn in, Marianne asked her to describe my role at the Historical Society. Margaret didn't exaggerate. She didn't need to. Evelyn is the backbone of our archival department, she said plainly. She handles primary documents that cannot be replaced. Her attention to detail is exceptional. Her judgment is sound. She leaned forward slightly. If Miss Hart were incompetent, Your Honor, I would not trust her with materials that shape our understanding of state history. But I do. Every day. The judge nodded and made a note. Next came my bank manager. A man in a conservative suit who spoke in spreadsheets and calm percentages. He presented summaries of my accounts, consistent savings, strong credit, 0 debt beyond my mortgage. No drama. Just numbers. Then 2 friends from my book club. Ordinary women. Teachers. A nurse. People who talked about dinners at my apartment, about long conversations, about my reliability and kindness. Nothing extraordinary. Which was exactly the point. With every witness, the image my parents had tried to sell, the fragile, isolated daughter, lost coherence. What replaced it was something far more dangerous to their case. A competent adult. Finally, Marianne said the words I'd been bracing for all day. The defense calls Evelyn Hart. My heart pounded as I stood. I walked to the stand carefully, feeling the eyes on me. I swore the oath and sat. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at Marianne. She guided me through my education. My job. My home. She asked me why I chose archival work. I told the truth. Because preserving ordinary lives mattered to me. Because history wasn't just dates and wars, it was letters, journals, quiet voices. It wasn't a dead-end job. It was a calling. I described my routines. My budgeting. My plans. It was boring. Normal. Undeniably sane. Then Marianne approached the bench. Your Honor, she said, at this time the defense would like to submit a verified inventory of Ms. Hart's assets into the record. My parents stiffened. The judge nodded. Proceed. The bailiff took the binder and opened it. His voice was steady. Official. Item 1, primary residence, condominium unit 4B, owned outright. Estimated market value, $400,000. My father's eyes flicked toward me. They hadn't known it was paid off. Item 2, retirement and investment accounts, diversified. Current value approximately $220,000. My mother's hand moved to her throat. The bailiff continued. Item 3, collection of rare first edition historical texts, journals, and primary documents, professionally appraised. Estimated value, $1,500,000. The room inhaled as one. It wasn't loud. But it was unmistakable. Shock. The judge leaned forward. Price's face drained of color. My father turned fully toward me, disbelief written plainly across his features. What collection? He demanded under his breath. My mother stared, her carefully rehearsed expression gone. The bailiff cleared his throat and continued. Item 4, vintage 1965 Ford Mustang, fully restored. Insured value, $180,000. My father gripped the table. They thought I drove a sedan. I did. The Mustang was for Sundays. Item 5, additional historical artifacts and antique maps. Insured value, $300,000. Item 6, municipal and corporate bond holdings. $400,000. Item 7, liquid savings. $150,000. He closed the binder. The total hovered in the air like a physical weight. Over $2.5 million. Quietly built. Entirely self-managed. Judge Caldwell looked up. Ms. Hart, he said calmly, do you affirm under penalty of perjury that this inventory is accurate? Yes, Your Honor. Marianne stood. This inventory has been verified by court-approved appraisers and auditors. Every asset is documented, insured, and legally owned by my client. She paused. This establishes 3 facts beyond dispute. First, Ms. Hart is not financially incompetent. She is exceptionally disciplined. Second, the petitioner's claims of immaturity are not merely incorrect, they are gross misrepresentations. And third, she said, turning slightly toward my parents, it raises serious questions about motive. The silence was thick now. Part 6, when the masks fell. For a moment, no one spoke. The numbers still hung in the air, solid, undeniable, lethal to the story my parents had carefully constructed. Then Jonathan Price shot to his feet. Your Honor, he said sharply. This so-called inventory is a stunt. We had no prior knowledge of these alleged assets. Their provenance is questionable at best. Sit down, Mr. Price, Judge Caldwell said calmly. Price froze. Marianne didn't raise her voice. The provenance is impeccable, she said. And your lack of knowledge is the point. This petition was filed based on assumption, ignorance, and presumption. You assumed that because the petitioners chose not to know their daughter's life, there was nothing to discover. She turned to the judge. They were wrong. The judge nodded slowly. Ms. Hart, he said to me, you may step down. I returned to my seat, legs trembling only after I sat. Judge Caldwell leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Hart, he said, voice measured, your petition asserts that your daughter cannot manage assets of significant value. He gestured toward the binder. The court has just been presented with evidence that she not only manages such assets but has done so independently and successfully, without your knowledge. My father finally found his voice. Your Honor, he said tightly, if these assets exist, that only heightens our concern. That kind of value in inexperienced hands is a target for fraud. Marianne's eyes flicked up. Mr. Hart, Judge Caldwell said dryly, your concern would be more persuasive if you had known these assets existed. A murmur rippled through the room. Then the judge looked at Marianne. You mentioned potential financial pressures on the petitioners. Elaborate. This was it. Marianne opened a new folder. Your Honor, she said evenly, we have documentation showing the petitioner's primary residence is heavily leveraged, with multiple liens. She handed copies to the bailiff. We also have records of failed high-risk investments within the last 18 months. She paused. And most notably, a pending malpractice lawsuit against Mr. Hart's firm seeking damages exceeding $5 million. The room went dead silent. Marianne's voice didn't waver. A conservatorship over a daughter with suddenly revealed liquidatable assets worth over $2.5 million would be, at the very least, convenient timing. My mother made a small choking sound. That's not, she began. The judge raised a hand. The truth didn't need volume. Judge Caldwell studied the documents carefully, then looked up. The petition is based on incapacity that has been conclusively disproven, he said. And the evidence suggests this filing may have been made in bad faith. Price tried one last time. Your Honor, we move to strike this evidence as prejudicial. Denied, the judge said firmly. Then my father stood. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. It was raw. You ungrateful little liar, he shouted, pointing at me. You hid this from us. After everything we gave you, you owe us. The words echoed. My mother gasped. The judge's face hardened instantly. Bailiff, he said sharply, get security. 2 court officers moved forward at once. My father froze, his face flushing with sudden realization. You will sit down, the judge said coldly. Another outburst and you will be held in contempt. Do you understand? Slowly, my father collapsed back into his chair. The mask was gone. So was the case. Judge Caldwell turned back to the record. The petition for conservatorship is denied, he said. Dismissed with prejudice. The gavel came down. Then he wasn't finished. I am ordering a formal inquiry into whether this petition was filed maliciously or in bad faith. My mother began to cry, not performatively this time. Real tears. The judge turned to me. Ms. Hart, he said, voice softening just slightly, the court apologizes for the ordeal you have endured. You are more than capable of managing your own life. The gavel struck again. This case is closed. I sat very still. The war was over. And for the first time in my life, the silence felt victorious. Part 7, after the gavel fell. The courtroom emptied in a strange, hollow quiet. People filed out in small clusters, murmuring about lunch plans, traffic, other cases. The mundanity of it felt obscene. As if nothing monumental had just happened. I stayed seated for a moment, my hands still flat on the table, grounding myself in the solid wood beneath my palms. Across the aisle, chaos simmered. Jonathan Price leaned in toward my father, whispering furiously. I caught fragments, I told you, stay calm, you ruined it. My father stared down at the table as if the grain of the wood might rearrange itself into an explanation for how he had lost control so completely. My mother fumbled in her purse, eyes red, mascara smudged. She didn't look at me. Mary Ann began packing her briefcase with the same calm precision she'd shown all day. She touched my arm lightly. "Let's go," she said. "Don't look at them. Don't speak to them." I stood. My legs felt disconnected, like I was borrowing them from someone else, but they held. As we passed their table, I made the mistake of glancing over. My father looked up. For a second, our eyes met. The fury was still there, but layered beneath it was something worse. Shock. Loss. The dawning realization that the version of me he'd carried in his head had never existed. He was looking at a stranger. A stranger who had beaten him at his own game. My mother turned then, her face crumpling completely. "Evelyn," she whispered. "Please." I didn't stop. I didn't answer. I walked out behind Mary Ann through the heavy courtroom doors and into the bright, echoing hallway beyond. The contrast was dizzying. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Someone laughed down the corridor. A vending machine hummed. Life went on. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun hit my face like a physical force. I inhaled deeply, the air sharp and cold in my lungs. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath. Mary Ann turned to me, and for the first time since we'd met, she smiled. A real one. "You were perfect," she said. "They never saw it coming." I swallowed. The collection. I didn't know it would matter like that. She shook her head. "It mattered because you mattered. That wasn't luck. That was discipline." She squeezed my shoulder once. "The inquiry into their conduct will move forward. That's my job now. You're free." Then she was gone, striding back toward the courthouse doors like someone who had done this many times before and would do it many times again. I stood there alone for a long moment. The adrenaline drained away, leaving exhaustion in its wake, but beneath it was something unfamiliar. Peace. Not joy. Not triumph. Peace. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove across town to the rented garage unit I'd kept for years without telling anyone. I unlocked the door and rolled it up. There she was. My 1965 Mustang, deep forest green, chrome gleaming softly under the fluorescent lights. A project I'd poured time and care into slowly, patiently, just like everything else in my life. I ran a hand along the hood. For the first time since the envelope arrived, I smiled. A real smile. Then I closed the garage, got back in my sensible sedan, and drove home to my quiet condo and the life I had just won back. The days that followed passed in a strange hush. At work, Margaret handed me a mug of tea that tasted like it could strip paint and said, "Don't thank me." Catalogued the Henderson letters. They're a disaster. It was the kindest thing she could have done. Normalcy felt sacred. The news spread, of course. Suburbs like Lake Oswego thrive on whispers. The story shifted with every retelling, hidden assets, courtroom drama, a judge threatening sanctions. I heard all of it secondhand. I didn't engage. Then, a week after the hearing, my doorbell rang. To see if there was any way you could help. I shook my head. There's nothing to fix. The court fixed it. He nodded slowly, absorbing that. As he left, he paused at the door. "That car," he said. "The Mustang. Is it really a 65? I smiled faintly. "It is." He shook his head, baffled. "I never knew you were into cars." "There's a lot you never knew," I said. After he left, the apartment felt quiet again, but not lonely. Free. Part 8, The Visit in the Rain. The legal aftermath moved quickly, but quietly. Mary Ann called a few days after Daniel's visit. Her tone was brisk, satisfied. "The court has formally opened an inquiry into bad faith filing," she said. Your parents will likely be ordered to pay a significant portion of your legal fees. There may also be sanctions. I felt no rush of pleasure at the news. Just finality. There's also a disciplinary review underway for their attorney, she added. The bar doesn't take kindly to weaponizing conservatorship. Thank you, I said, and meant it. After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen window for a long time, watching rain slide down the glass. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I felt settled. 3 months passed. Autumn gave way to a gray, persistent drizzle, the kind of weather that makes you grateful for walls and roofs and routines. My life returned to its old rhythm, but lighter, as if a background hum I'd grown used to had finally been switched off. One Thursday evening, I was curled into my armchair with a book and a mug of tea when the building buzzer pierced the quiet. I frowned. No one ever came by unannounced. I pressed the intercom button. Yes. Static. Rain. Then a voice, thin, strained, unmistakable. Evelyn. It's your mother. My body went cold. Every boundary Marianne had drilled into me rose instantly to the surface. Say no. End the call. Do not engage. But another part of me, the part that had survived the courtroom, the exposure, the truth, felt a strange, distant curiosity. What do you want? I asked. 5 minutes, she said softly. Please. I stared at the wall. 5 minutes, I said finally. I buzzed her in. I unlocked my door but didn't open it right away. I listened to her climb the stairs, slow, uneven steps. No elevator. That alone felt like a different world. When I opened the door, the woman standing there barely resembled the mother I remembered. She was soaked. Her trench coat darkened by rain, hair plastered to her head, makeup gone. Without it, she looked older, 10 years, maybe more. The lines on her face weren't just age. They were something deeper. Regret, maybe. Or confusion. She clutched a small handbag like it was the only solid thing left. You're wet, I said. I walked from the bus stop, she replied, as if that explained everything. It did. Come in, I said, stepping aside. You're dripping on the hall carpet. She entered hesitantly, eyes scanning my apartment, not greedily, but hungrily, like she was searching for clues. She noticed the antique map on the wall. The armchair. The herb pots on the windowsill. Her gaze lingered on the empty spaces where shelves once held my collection. She said nothing. Sit, I said, gesturing to the kitchen table. I handed her a towel. She dabbed at her hair mechanically. I stayed standing. Distance mattered. We sold the house, she said after a long silence. Yesterday. I nodded. I heard. She flinched. We're renting an apartment in Brookside, she continued. Your father doesn't leave the study much. She finally looked up at me, eyes raw and lost. How did everything go so wrong? The question stunned me, not because it hurt, but because it revealed something terrifying. She truly didn't know. You tried to have a court declare me incompetent so you could sell everything I own, I said calmly. The court saw through it. That's what happened. She shook her head, bewildered. We were trying to help you. You always needed guidance. I needed parents, I replied quietly. Not managers. She stared at her hands, twisting the towel. I came to give you this, she said suddenly, fumbling in her bag. She pulled out a small, worn velvet jewelry box and slid it across the table. It was your grandmother's, she said. She left it to me. I always meant to give it to you. I didn't touch it. I don't want jewelry, I said. It's not an apology, she rushed. I know it can't be. It's just, it belongs with you. I opened it anyway. Inside was a simple silver oak leaf pendant, delicate, understated. Something my mother would never wear. "Thank you," I said, closing the box. It sat between us like a tiny, inadequate bridge. She stood. "I'll go," she said. At the door, she hesitated. "Asher says you're doing well," she said. "That you're happy." "I am." She nodded slowly, absorbing the fact like news from another country. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," she whispered. This time, it didn't sound rehearsed. Then she was gone. I stood alone in my kitchen for a long time after. Eventually, I put the jewelry box in a drawer and returned to my armchair. The tea had gone cold. But the silence felt clean. The past had come, spoken, and left again. And it had no power here anymore. Part 9, What Remained. Spring arrived quietly. No dramatic shift. No symbolic moment where everything suddenly felt new. Just longer light in the evenings, green pushing through gray, the city easing into warmth one ordinary day at a time. So did I. The museum exhibit opened on a Saturday morning. It was titled Voices from the Furnace, Everyday Lives in an Industrial Age, a collaboration between the Oregon Historical Society and the State Museum, built largely around pieces from my collection. I didn't stand at the front. I stayed near the back, anonymous, watching people lean closer to glass cases. Watching them read letters written by factory workers, diary entries by surveyors, notes scribbled by women whose names never made it into textbooks. I saw a teenage girl trace a paragraph with her finger, lips moving silently. An older man pointed to a schematic and told his grandson, "That's the bridge we drive over every day." My collection, my quiet, private passion, had become something larger than me. Not wealth. Meaning. Dr. Evans found me near the exit and squeezed my arm. "You did this," he said. "We did," I corrected. And I meant it. Work changed after that. Not overnight. Not loudly. But people began to see me differently, not as someone hidden away in archives, but as a professional with judgment, expertise, and voice. I was invited into conversations instead of standing at the edges of them. It wasn't validation I'd been waiting for. It was alignment. Daniel called every few weeks. At first, awkwardly. Then more easily. He'd sold his condo, downsized, hired a financial advisor I recommended. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for rescue. He asked questions. How do you decide what's worth keeping? How do you know when something is actually yours, not theirs? I didn't always have answers. But I listened. And that was enough. My parents faded from my life not with drama, but with distance. No more attempts. No more intermediaries. No more pressure. Their silence no longer felt like a threat. It felt like closure. One afternoon, months later, I drove the Mustang out beyond the city, windows down, engine humming, the road unwinding ahead of me. I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't proving anything. I was just moving. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because she was different. But because she finally